very deliberately trying to strengthen key areas that we might not always train as deliberately with squat, bench, deadlift, of the foot and ankle, of the knee and hamstring, like the hamstring down kind of behind the knee, those sorts of things. And then making plyometrics, having a very clear kind of progression for that as well, of just the actual kind of plyometrics, landing mechanics, different things like that being something that we have a much clearer progression or a very deliberate way of training.
Zach, welcome to the Strong Female Athlete podcast.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I'm really excited you're here because I've been following a lot of your content and you do such amazing work with girls soccer players and female athletes who are coming back from injury, but who also just want to get strong for their sport. And I know you're a soccer player yourself and you're in this space every single day. And I'm really curious if you agree with me on this, but I said something the other day that got people all up in arms, but I said, I think a lot of soccer players are kind of getting soft nowadays because they can't keep up with the increasing demands, especially in the youth, college, and pro space. I just don't know what you're seeing, but I just think soccer players aren't carving out enough time for physical development. So, would you agree with that?
I think there's a case to be made for that for sure. I think if you ask most of the like kind of ex pros and stuff like that who played 30, 40 years ago, I think most of them would say that the game's a little bit softer than it used to be for sure. It's interesting. It feels like it's faster, but it definitely feels like it's less physical. It's a little bit softer, and it's almost, you could kind of see that across multiple different sports. I mean, people talk about that with football, basketball. Everyone's like, oh, game's soft now compared to what it used to be. And in terms of just like the physical prep side of things, it's interesting to see. I mean, soccer's never been, most soccer players aren't usually huge kind of weight room athletes. That's never really been a priority for a lot of us. So yeah, I think there's a case to be made for that for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, soccer is really interesting because it's the one sport where it does have the majority of knee injuries, but then it's the least likely sport to get in the gym. But do you find that a lot of soccer players aren't strong enough or don't possess certain physical qualities that is kind of causing this rise in injuries?
Be hard to say if it's one to one of kind of that's where it's coming from. I mean, the to play devil's advocate, like we probably do more kind of weight training and stuff like that on average than we did 30 years ago, but we have more kind of ACLs and knee injuries than we did back then. So I think especially if we look at the female side, like the strength side of things is a big part of the equation. But I think where most people miss is I think it's more of a relative strength issue than an absolute strength issue. Like it's an issue of just their ability to kind of control and load their own body weight. Obviously, guys are going to be just stronger than girls on average, but I think that relative strength to weight ratio is something that gets overlooked. Of most guys can kind of bang out push-ups and chin-ups and kind of pistol squats and stuff like that, even if they're not amazing. If they need to, you're going to be very hard pressed to see just like kind of your average girl who hasn't trained be able to get those same kind of standards. And so I think improving that element of it is something that, especially with my female athletes coming back from ACL surgery, that we put a little bit more of an emphasis on. So I think we've gotten close to that with a lot of our emphasis in the weight room. I'm getting girls stronger. I think that's awesome. But that piece of, I don't care as much for them about how much they can box squat as how much they can kind of squat through a full range of motion, for example, or if they can do like kind of pistol squats, different things like that, where they can control their own body weight. I think that they have so much more to gain from that style of training.
I love it. Yeah, let's dive into that a little bit more because you do make such a good point that there is more strength training happening, but that doesn't mean it's the correct strength training. And oftentimes I hear with some like girls' high school teams, for example, they're training with the football strength coach and it's like those traditional like back squats. They're not really nailing down technique. They're not working on the reactive strength, like you said. So maybe let's dive into what reactive strength is. A lot of parents and female athletes listen to the podcast. So kind of explain what that is for them and why it's so important.
Yeah, well, I was talking about relative strength, which is just like your essentially your strength to weight ratio, like how comfortable you are kind of lifting your own body weight, controlling your own body weight. So like a super easy example is something like a chin up. A bigger athlete is going to have a harder time doing chin ups than a smaller athlete because they have to move more weight. And so your ability to do something like that, the more reps that you can do in a chin up, for example, is just an easy way to say like, okay, this person has good upper body strength compared to their own body weight versus something like a bench press where where it's the weight on the bar. So then you could do math of like how much weight do you bench versus what is your body weight and kind of do math that way. So there's kind of two ways to go about that. But we're essentially looking at the stronger you are relative to your own body weight, the much more athletic you're going to be. The easier it is to be able to jump, to sprint, because the main implement we have when we do anything athletic, the main thing we have to control is our own body weight. So the lighter that feels, like the stronger I am compared to kind of how my own body weight feels, the easier it's going to be to be able to run, change directions, put my foot in the ground, decelerate, accelerate, do all of these different things that I want to do. So that's kind of one of the key markers for me versus just the weight that you have on the bar. It's going to tell me a lot more about the athlete that I'm working with.
Yeah, I love that. And it's also like something I see a lot of. A lot of girls don't really push it and gain that strength relative to body weight, and they're kind of just hanging out at the 20-pound dumbbell. It's like, no, we need to move past this. So, what are some maybe like standards you have in terms of what should they RDL in terms of their body weight, or like front squat, split squat? You mentioned pistol squats. What are some standards you recommend they get close to?
Hey guys, just want to take a quick moment to shout out our sponsor, Simply Faster, and one of my favorite speed timing systems from them, the Freelap. I use it for my own sprint training as well as for my athletes, and they love it. It's super easy to set up, you can take it to the field on your own, and you can get accurate speed times to track your progress. Check the Freelap link in the caption below to start adding timing into your speed sessions. If you know me, you know I love my Freelap. If you're serious about speed, it's time to start timing.
For sure. So this, for me, I kind of combine this with some of the unique kind of exercise selection that I'm really, really big on too. So like you could have a strength to weight ratio for a back squat, but to me, I love to kind of get girls on like a slant board or elevate their heels and see what kind of squat you can do through a full range of motion. That does a few things for me. One, when we elevate the heels, it makes the mobility piece a lot easier. So I can get you in a narrower stance, which to me, mechanics wise, I like a lot better. This is one of the things, if we just touch on kind of just the general strength stuff too, that I think we're missing with a lot of the girls aspect, or why there are more injuries even though we're doing more strength training now. It's because I think some of the traditional lifts don't have amazing carryover in terms of just mechanics, like movement mechanics and stuff like that. So that kind of just wide stance, like kind of shallow back squat, there's kind of debate to be made whether that has like great carryover to running and that sort of thing. So for me, if I put you on a slant board, now I get to squat you through a full range of motion, which is going to be phenomenal for the joint itself. So this is probably, if there's only one thing I could do to get girls kind of coming back stronger from surgery or just getting stronger in the weight room in general to prevent injuries in the first place, if I could get you squatting through a full range of motion, that would be phenomenal. So we get to take the muscle through the full range of motion, but it also does really, really good things for the joint itself. And so a good standard for most girls to be able to get to is if you can put your body weight on your back for a handful of reps, good control through a full range of motion, that's absolutely phenomenal. Then if we flip around and hit the backside, probably my favorite kind of hamstring exercise, again, like I come a little bit more from that return to sports perspective, but Nordic hamstring curls for girls coming back from ACL surgery, probably the single biggest most important hamstring exercise I want you to be able to really, really master. And so being able to, for people that don't recognize that one where you're kind of kneeling and you're trying to control yourself all the way down. And if you can control those last couple of inches in the very, very bottom, if you want to be a superstar and start working the way back up, amazing. But if girls just did those two things, if we got an entire team of girls to be able to squat their body weight on a slant board and then be able to do Nordics all of the way down, my God, you cut injuries in half. You could have like the most athletic group of girls like that we have out there. There's more that we can do, but like just doing those two things can take you so far.
Yeah, I love that. And those were the two things that really stood out that you talked a lot about on your page. And it really does go away from just traditional strength and conditioning. And not a lot of people are really talking about the importance of that. Now, is there anything else that you do, any of those main lifts like trap bar deadlifts or RDLs?
Yeah, we'll definitely do some of that stuff for sure. To me, I think of that as a little bit more of like top end, like kind of icing on the cake versus the kind of like foundation and stuff like that. To me, if we look at the general, like traditional kind of S and C, the two things I think that we kind of leave untapped or we have issues with those. One are those kind of mechanics piece that we talked about of some of our different lifts having these kind of positions that I don't know if translates great to kind of running form and that sort of thing. But then even more so than that, we tend to build girls up disproportionately in terms of where we're kind of building strength and that sort of thing. So a lot of our traditional kind of S&C and that sort of stuff, it's very hip focused and it's very kind of short ranges of motion. If we think about our trap bar, our RDLs, all of these different things in terms of where they're the hardest, it's going to be through usually kind of like glutes, lower back, through that kind of like hip area and through relatively kind of shallow ranges of motion. And so the issue is when we make that kind of the main thing and then we have some of these like stuff for the foot and ankle, stuff for the knee that we train, but we don't train with the same intent, the same intensity, the same quality. What we're doing is we're building girls up disproportionately in terms of their strength. So the analogy I always like to use is we're putting a race car engine in a golf cart. Of we're giving people this more horsepower of like they're more athletic, explosive, everything like that. But then we don't have the tissue tolerance, we don't have the strength in other areas to be able to handle that. And so that's where we're almost kind of manufacturing some of these injuries, I think, because we're making girls that are more explosive, but then it's the deceleration where we get into trouble. And so a lot of the different strength training things that I do, it's trying to build up a lot of these pieces proportionately. So that way I don't think there's anything wrong with the trap bar deadlift with an RDL. I want us to get very strong there. I just want to get strong everywhere else as well in a way that's a little bit more kind of proportional, a way that's a little bit more balanced. So I see some of the kind of trap bar and that sort of stuff. It's great for improving rate of force production, force output, that sort of thing. It's very like kind of neural driven of just can I kind of produce force. Then I also want to be able to take care of the tendons, the ligaments, the connective tissue to be able to handle that force when I go and use it. So that's just a kind of extra lens that I think about when I'm kind of designing strength training programs and that sort of thing. I want to have both of those. I think we've just gotten a little bit focused in kind of the S&C world on force production, force output. I think we spend, when we look at research and development, like 7 times more money on studying acceleration than we do on deceleration. And so it's just like when we do that of like we're breaking world records in track and field events, but then we have more ACL tears than we've ever had. And I think it's kind of, if we start to look at that from a more kind of global perspective, that's where that stuff's coming from. We have more athletic girls than we've ever had before and more injured girls. So it's like, how do those two things make sense? And I think that's why we're making them more explosive, more powerful, more capable of hurting themselves without giving them the tools to be able to kind of handle and withstand that, if that all makes sense.
Oh, 100%. And yeah, it is really interesting. A lot of the research is more so on the acceleration side, but the ACLs happen during deceleration. So it's like, what are we doing here? So what are some things you do to really focus on building that deceleration ability?
Yeah, so a couple different things. One, that deep range of motion piece is, I think, so valuable for everyone, but especially for girls. It seems like when we take stuff through a deeper range of motion, it seems to have a much more positive effect, much more of a training stimulus effect on the actual joints, tendons, and connective tissue themselves, as well as just kind of muscle tissue or neural output. So I think that's a big lens of, can we deliberately with our training try and actually strengthen these pieces that are going to be able to be very involved with deceleration, change of direction, and that sort of thing. So that's a huge part of it for me. Very deliberately trying to strengthen key areas that we might not always train as deliberately with squat, bench, deadlift, of the foot and ankle, of the knee and hamstring, like the hamstring down kind of behind the knee, those sorts of things. And then making plyometrics, having a very clear kind of progression for that as well, of just the actual kind of plyometrics, landing mechanics, different things like that being something that we have a much clearer progression or a very deliberate way of training, rather than something that we just like kind of attach to our training kind of the end. It's just kind of thrown in without the same intent and detail that like a lot of our weight room stuff is.
Mhm. Now, I do love a lot of your plyometric stuff. I've actually tried the rebound hops. Those are really hard from a
Harder than they look.
coordination standpoint. It takes a lot of coordination and rhythm, but I'm sure there's so many other benefits that we can talk about if you want to get into those.
Yeah, so that one specifically for people that are just kind of trying to picture it, it's imagine you're doing a box jump almost continuously. So as soon as you get on, you're going backwards to the same spot that you landed and then right back on. And so there's definitely a coordination piece that you can figure it out pretty quickly. Once you do 2 or 3 sets, like it starts to kind of clean up. But there is a huge load. That's probably one of the most intense plyometrics you could possibly put on that Achilles tendon, because of that kind of backwards loading to go into. Your heels don't quite touch the floor off of that that high box. It is a huge kind of stretch shortening cycle, kind of quick rebound through that foot and ankle and Achilles. So it's probably my favorite plyometric to strengthen. Again, just that foot, ankle, lower leg. Especially when we look at more of like NFL, like how many Achilles tears were happening these days, of like being able to get into some standards like that is something that's highly effective. But yeah, I love different depth jump variations through all of these different angles. So kind of more forwards one off of a box onto another box is going to be a lot more kind of knee heavy. And then even lateral, if you imagine just going over and back like a hurdle kind of side to side, just hits slightly different kind of angles, vectors. And so that like triple set of, if you can do those three, like a kind of, when you go back to kind of metrics and standards and stuff like that, I like if you had a waist high box, something that you stood next to and it came up to your waist, you should be able to do those rebound jumps kind of forward and backwards, that real kind of ankle, calf, Achilles one, depth jumps kind of forward and backwards onto another box, and then lateral kind of over that height. If it was a hurdle box, is obviously a little bit more spread out. But if you can do those three things, you're going to be better than 95, 99% of girls out there in terms of just athletic ability, coordination, and kind of readiness from a strength and conditioning perspective.
Yeah, I see a lot of girls soccer players doing strength and conditioning programs where there's no plyometrics happening. And
Yeah.
it's really
Oh, that's terrible.
crazy. And you're right, there's so many of those performance benefits to the injury reduction benefits. And I want to know, like, what do people get wrong the most about plyometrics and programming them?
I think there's a few different things. One is they probably only do the kind of max effort, max intensity plyometrics with very low volume. So just thinking like a max effort box jump, like we're going to jump as high as we can onto this box. We're going to do 3 sets of 5, and that's all of the jumping stimulus we're going to get from our entire kind of workout that day or that kind of program. So it's only the like the very top end, and it's a tiny little dosage. There's so much value to be had in extensive plyometrics, some of the deep tier plyometrics that you maybe see me talking about through some of the
Yeah.
deeper ranges of motion. But you even touched on the coordination aspect of plyometrics, of like using these as skill training, but then it's so good from a kind of tissue prep, kind of tissue training perspective. That's one of the nice things that plyometrics allow us to complement all of our strength training stuff with, is it's because it's that kind of fast elastic kind of training stimulus. It is a slightly different training stimulus physiologically for the tendons, for the connective tissue, for the muscle tissue, than our slow loading kind of strength training. And so when we have both of those and we can program them really deliberately, we can kind of hit both ends of the spectrum from a kind of tissue perspective, which is super useful. So that's one. And then another one is probably too slow ground contacts. Like true plyometrics are using the stretch shortening cycle, using the impact of landing to come back up. So in that exact same box jump example, there's no landing. Like we don't get the eccentric piece, and that comes back to the strength training piece of the trap bar deadlift. We do the explode, let go. It's like we were taking away that kind of loading piece, that eccentric piece, which is where we have all of the adaptation from absorbing force for kind of that energy that's going into the tendons and the connective tissue. And so that's where like all three of those, the big plyometrics that I just mentioned, all of them have a landing and rebounding component. It's not a pause kind of in between each one. So I think we overdo, again, it's not that that's bad. We just overdo that one and miss some of the ones over here. And then again, yeah, just that extensive kind of low intensity, high volume, high ground contact plyos, whether it's for the ankle, whether it's for the knee. I think with that stuff, we don't touch at all. The deep tier stuff, we don't touch at all. So it's similar to our strength training of we just have, we're hyper focused on one small aspect of it. And so it's not that that aspect is bad, it's just we're missing 80% of the stuff over here. And so again, we're kind of wondering why we're building girls disproportionately, of we're only training one piece and missing all of this stuff over here. I think those are probably the biggest things we're missing.
Yeah. Yeah, we're definitely missing a lot of plyometrics, and girls can't really go wrong jumping more, leaping, bounding more, hopping more. And you mentioned the deep tier plyometrics. I'm a huge fan of those, especially for the rehab piece, and we'll talk about that soon. But what's the benefit of the deep tier, and can you kind of explain what that is?
Yep. So deep tier is essentially if you just think about doing kind of plyometrics from a lower position through like a deeper range of motion is how you could essentially think about that. So a squat or a lunge where you're pretty far down and you're either jumping out of that or you're kind of going in and out of that, but as opposed to like a jump rope or a pogo where it's a very light, springy kind of plyometric through a higher range of motion. This one's through that deeper range of motion. There's a longer ground contact time. And so the benefits are, I think the coordination piece from going in and out of those positions is actually really, really underrated. I think that piece is really, really huge. But then also just the deep range of motion stuff we know has a really positive impact on the joint itself. And so it's a great way to kind of hydrate, lubricate the joint. We get to get reps in there through that deeper range of motion, which is phenomenal for the connective tissue. And then it's a little bit of a kind of just different muscular stimulus as well. So it's just one of those things that's just so untapped. And there's multiple different benefits you can get out of it from kind of all three of those angles.
Yeah, the muscular component, every time I do them, my quad is burning. I'm just like,
Yeah,
because we're never
exactly.
in those positions, and like no amount of like squats or split squats will give you that type of burn initially. So it's pretty crazy.
And so it's such a great way to get a muscular stimulus without having to go into the weight room of like, or it's just a
Yeah.
different stimulus than we could of like, okay, we did split squats on Monday in the weight room. We can do our deep tier lunges on Thursday, and that's like a muscular stimulus. It's a strength stimulus just with a different kind of training parameter than it would be just with dumbbells or with a barbell.
Yeah. I really like your approach to all this. So for girl soccer players, the main things to really start working on now is full range of motion for the squats, the Nordic ham curls, getting quality plyometric programming in there. Is there anything else you would add just for girls to stay healthy, fast, powerful, be able to decelerate well?
I think just from a general way of being able to think about stuff is I always love the idea of getting the opposite of what you're getting in sport or get what your sport is not giving you. So sport is very kind of fast, sharp, change of direction, a lot of cutting, a lot of kind of intense, kind of short range of motion movements if we think about kind of the joints and that sort of stuff. So then, okay, if we want to balance that out, if we want to maximize that as much as we can we get long, slow, deep range of motion type work with our strength stuff? Can we get into some of these different positions that we're not going to get into kind of out on the pitch, out on the field, some of these deeper ranges of motion? If you just have that kind of as a kind of first principle, it makes it really, really easy to kind of structure all of your training kind of long term without getting lost in the weeds of like actual nitty gritty of you have to be doing kind of XYZ. But it's like, okay, I always think about like we're a human first, we're an athlete second, we're a soccer player third. If you want to think about like kind of that sports performance pyramid type thing. So if I want to be a really, really high level soccer player, I want to do a lot of stuff up here, kind of the top of the pyramid. Well, I need to have an even bigger athletic base underneath that and just an even bigger kind of human base underneath that. I need to be a high functioning human to be a high functioning athlete to be a high functioning soccer player. So if I sleep terribly, if I eat terribly, all of these different things, that's going to impact my ability just to be a high level human, which is going to impact everything kind of up the chain. So if I want to be able to play 8, 10 hours of soccer a week, then man, I better be a really, really good kind of athlete from a physical preparation standpoint. I better really, really be taking care of just the way myself, the way a normal human would, being able to eat, sleep, take care of myself, all of these different things. So from those perspectives, it's like, what do I need to do to be able to do this thing up here at a high level very, very often?
Mhm. That's brilliant. Now I want to shift to ACL rehab. This one kind of makes me sad because I see a lot of the re-tear statistics. I've also heard the statistics on how athletes never go back to the player they once were. And, you look at some of these traditional physical therapy programs and it's like, ooh. So maybe we can just start with what do you think is wrong right now with the current state of ACL rehab and why is the re-tear rate so high?
Yeah, it's definitely like depending on the statistics, it's pretty abysmal in terms of either just like you said, not getting back to the level of athlete that you were previously, or getting re-injured. Like the statistics around that are just horrible. It's as high as 3 out of 4, depending on kind of where you look, will fall into one of those two buckets. And so that means to me like we have upwards of 75% failure rate in this industry of getting people back to where it is they want to be and be successful. Like even a 75% success rate is something I think we could improve on. But failure rates, it's crazy. So I think there's definitely a lot of things that go into that. I think the biggest piece is honestly just the model of like the insurance-based model that's designed for kind of mom and pop or like your dad to be able to go back to his job. Like that is the environment that most athletes are getting thrown into of like it's not really designed for high level athletes to go back to high level competition. Now you can find that if you kind of cherry pick and find the right people kind of here and there. But yeah, by and large, like clearance criteria are like, hey, you can go up and down stairs okay, like you've got grandma and grandpa on the table next to you, like just doing manual stuff. Like it's not an environment for a high level athlete. And then insurance will give you, depending on kind of how you use it, like 6 months worth of visits for a 9 to 12 month rehab process. So it's just like we're setting people up to fail, and there's nothing after that. So like that wouldn't even be the main issue. It's just like, okay, this was designed to get you started, and that's kind of the conversation I have with athletes of like I try not to go kind of too hard on just the all of the rehab stuff is terrible. All of these people are like the reason you're getting your hurt. Like just kind of accept it for what it is. Of like it's a great first step. It gets you back on your feet, able to get through your day to day, like everything like that. But then like cleared does not mean ready. Like there is still so much more that you have to do on the back end. And so I think that's the biggest thing is it's just we're expecting something that is designed to get you part of the way there to get you all of the way there. And so I think that's just why people are falling through the cracks of that conversation not being had with them in the beginning from like the PT physio perspective of like, hey, we're going to get you here, but then you need to do X afterwards. And then just, yeah, setting that expectation from the beginning would be hugely important. And then we need more of that kind of gray area of kind of return to sport where I've kind of branded myself to be of like, what's that transition look like of most of the people in the medical space don't have the performance background in order to actually train you to like a high level kind of end. And then most of the people in the performance background don't really have the either time because they've got a team of people. They can't help you if you're coming back in a college setting. Like the strength coach has already got 100 people he's got to work with. He can't figure out how to do your thing. Or they just don't have the skill set, the desire, anything like that to help you kind of bridge that gap. And so we're getting athletes just dangerous enough to hurt themselves again. And so that's, I think, the issue of kind of why this happens so much.
Now, you've said on your page that a lot of rehab is not challenging enough and it should be hard. So let's dive into that more.
Yeah, so I mean, I think just it's almost should almost be common sense of like if you got injured at your previous 100%, especially if that was a non-contact injury, nobody touched you, you put your foot in the ground, things went pop. Like to me, that is a like your previous best should be a minimum threshold that we are looking to exceed. Like that should just be common sense of like we need to be better than we were before if we want to come back and give ourselves the best chance possible of kind of being healthy, staying healthy, doing all the things that we want to do. And most clearance criteria, like that's why I said clear does not mean ready to go. Like most clearance criteria is like 85, 90, 95% of your other leg, which they've just spent the last 6 months barely training. So like you're going to do your biodex, your leg extension, you're going to do your triple hop, and you're going to kind of compare like how you do from side to side. And so one, I just don't think those tests are even like, they're okay, but like they're not what you need for kind of high level stuff. And then they're like, okay, you're not as good as this other one, even though this one's not even as good as it was before because we barely trained it. Like, okay, go ahead. And so it's like it makes no sense to me of like there's no way that sort of environment, that sort of test, that sort of clearance protocol could get us back to that. So yeah, if we're not better than you were before you got hurt, then we're setting ourselves up for disappointment, either to come back and play and just not be the same or kind of get re-injured, both of which suck.
Mhm. Now, what is some clearance criteria that you've developed over the years where you fully feel confident that this athlete is ready to enter into a competitive setting again?
Yep. So for a few things from my end in terms of like kind of what we're doing in the actual kind of training aspect, some of those things that I mentioned in the beginning of that deep squat, full body weight, bar on back. If you get somebody post knee surgery to be able to put a bar on their back, squat cheeks to sneaks, touch their butt to their heel and come back up, like that's phenomenal. The confidence that they're going to have, like even from a healthy athlete to be able to do that is great. But for somebody coming back from knee surgery, that's awesome. Same thing, Nordics, if those can be super strong, there's a few other strength ones that we could get into there. But then a couple of those plyometrics that we mentioned with the different box jumps variations, really like those. Waist high box, boom, on and off, for reps. And then a couple of the other ones that I really, really like are a fly 10. So this is one of my issues with a lot of the rehab sport performance kind of protocols of they're just so low intensity compared to what you're going to actually go do on a pitch. Like a standing triple hop test, like the forces that you get are so low compared to what you're actually going to go and run into on the pitch. So a fly 10 is essentially a 10-yard sprint with a 30-yard head start. I'm just timing the last 10. So we can get up to your absolute top speed, like really see how fast you can possibly go, like really opening your legs up. I need you to be able to sprint as hard as you can, unrestricted, and kind of like upstairs, feel good about it. That's one of the things I always kind of have a conversation with my athletes of like, hey, there's physical markers that we're going to track, but all the time I'm monitoring like, how'd that feel? Like, do you feel like, can you feel yourself holding back or actually going for that? So that fly 10. And then I'll also do what I call like a max decel, where we do that exact same fly 10, except now you have a 5-yard gap on the back end as soon as you get through the lasers to stop before you hit this line. And so those two of like, yes, we can do change of direction stuff, but if we can hit your absolute top speed and then I can get you to hit the brakes, like really slam on that knee as hard as you can, and you can do that pain-free and you feel confident with that, that's phenomenal. Now I know you're going to be much more prepared than most other people. And then we actually help you kind of bridge the gap with the return to sports speed, the return to sports piece too, of like, I actually want to go through kind of step by step and help take a graded progression, a graded return to actual playing instead of like, cleared, okay, go jump back in again. And it's like, no wonder we feel like terrified. It's like you're going from 0 to 100. We have all of these tiny little progressions in the gym or in our rehab process of you do this and then you do this and you do this, like, and it's baby steps. So you feel very confident with each jump, but we don't do that same thing with the return to sport for the field stuff. And so for me, I want all of my athletes while we're going through this kind of progression in the gym to start to make that return, like getting familiar with a soccer ball again as well. So can you just go out to a field and just get some touches by yourself, just kind of get like moving around, start to get a feel for the ball. Like, does that feel okay? Then can we start to do stuff with a partner? Then can we start to jump into rondos? And then can we start to do kind of possession stuff where you're maybe just a neutral? Then we can start to get into non-contact and then contact within your team and then contact with another team. And so like that graded progression is really, really useful for the actual on-pitch stuff too. And so those kind of physical markers in the gym I want to have that kind of smooth return to sport process kind of over here. And then probably the single biggest marker for me as we're getting back into all of that, that will probably trump everything else that we just said in there, is where's your head at? And so every step of the way with all of the on-pitch stuff of like, does this feel good? Do we feel a little skittish? Do we feel like we can go do more? Do we need to kind of pull back a little bit? And so, because like that to me, like your brain, your subconscious knows when you're ready or not. And so that's where like, oh, I got cleared, but I still feel terrified to play. It's like, yeah, because then when we test you, you've got 8 things that you're not ready for. And so like the real end all be all of like, okay, yeah, you're good to go is some of my athletes will come back and be like, hey, like I went and had practice yesterday and like I forgot about my knee. Or I went and took this big hit and I popped right back up and was like, all right, see you later. Now we're where we want to be. So like when we can have these physical markers, and then when you up here are no longer kind of holding things back, because that will set you up to fail more than anything else, is when you're going out there and you're hesitant, you're guarding, you're trying to protect your knee. That's when you get hurt more than anything else, is when you're kind of playing scared or you still have that little bit of fear, hesitation. And so if you do that, that's okay. That just tells us where we're at. I don't want you to kind of go and push through that, but once you can go and really play all out and we don't have that little voice in the back of your head, then we're really, really good to go.
I love that. I don't think the mental readiness is talked about enough. And I've actually heard a lot of stories from parents of girls who had ACL tears that they just still had that reluctance, even though they were cleared every time. And I even had a college teammate who she got cleared at like 10 months, and she even told her physical therapist, I don't feel ready. And
Yeah,
he said, no, you're good. You
yeah, they want to
passed the
listen.
one leg press test. And she was like, I don't feel ready. She retore it 2 weeks later in her first scrimmage back, no one around her. It was a
Literally.
wrong plant. And it's like, that doesn't have to happen.
And yeah, like people, like the athletes will almost get like shamed for like for being like having this fear, having this hesitation of like, no, you just need to push through it, like whatever. And like to an extent, like every time you first get into stuff, there's going to be nerves, there's going to be jitters, like that's understandable. But then like that's something that we kind of take baby steps into like overcoming of like that's there for a reason. Like your brain knows, your subconscious knows. That's what I'm like basically looking at. It's like, hey, we've got all these tests here, but this guy running the show, like he's got more of a feel for what's going on than anything else. So if he's like then like okay, we've got to go back to the drawing board, see what are we still missing in order to get us there.
Yeah, for sure. And have you found with the athletes you've worked with that since they've gone through your rehab, it's super high quality, it's challenging, that they get all the physical benefits from your rehab, that it just manifests into that mental confidence towards the end?
Yeah, 100%. And that's the piece that I was going to say. If like you don't get the mental piece by like hyping yourself up in the mirror and the rah rah, like it
No.
comes from that physical preparation. And so it's like when
100%.
you do that, that's when you get that response that I was just talking about of like, ooh, I was kind of nervous, but then like I bumped into this guy and it felt really good. Like that's where that comes from. It's like I mean, how many kind of high level athletes do we have? Kobe talks about it all the time of like, where does all of this like confidence, ice, all that stuff, like it comes from preparation. And so it's like when you've done the things, then your brain's not chatting because it's like, yeah, we're good. Like we've done all the things. Like you'll have them be the butterflies when you're first getting out there. But like, yeah, it comes from that physical preparation. It's not something that you need to like do visualization. All that stuff's amazing. Go for it and that sort of thing. But like, that's not, if you're feeling terrified, that's not going to fix it. It's because we need to get that last 5%, that last 10%. And like when that's there, it will come all by itself.
I agree. We've talked about this a lot on the podcast that you can try and do all the self-talk and positive affirmations
Yeah.
you want, but if you don't have that true belief in yourself because you didn't do the work and you didn't prepare, then no amount of affirmations or visualizations or meditating is going to work. So I totally agree with you on this.
Yeah. Like it's an amazing tool when you use it to complement that, but it can't replace it.
Exactly. I need to get you in this Facebook group I'm in. It's called like the Parents of ACL Athletes Rehab Club, and honestly, being in the group kind of makes me sad. I'm in there for education, but it makes me sad because every day there's a post of someone like posting their kid in the PT clinic working out. It's like 9 months post-op. She has a little 10-pound dumbbell. Her knee is wobbling during like walking lunges. And I'm like, she should be doing rebound hops by now. She should be doing this, this, and this. It makes me so sad how much of that is going on. And I have to like get in there and be like, hey, like, you need to find someone in your area who can actually do this properly.
Yeah, I mean the amount of conversations that I've had that have the exact same experience as you of like, hey, I got injured my first game back. I went and retore this. Like you've just done 9 months, you've just done a year of like what's the most like lonely, frustrating, like just like terrible like process that you can go through. And then the first game, like, and it's just there's no accountability. Like they'll go back to the same PT and be like, oh, that sucks. Guess we got to do it again.
Crazy.
Like it's heartbreaking, honestly.
I've seen that too. They do go back to the same PT because they don't think that that was the problem, even though that
Yeah.
was the only thing you did for the past year. Like that was the common denominator. Like, and they're just like, oh, it was bad luck. And I'm like, we could have avoided it a
Yeah.
little better. So it makes me really sad. Is there anything else just to wrap this up, what girls should be focusing on in their rehab, or just a message you want everyone to hear?
I'd say if there was one kind of message, it's that like as much as this sucks, like I totally understand that this is not the most fun process in the world to go through. Like it's gonna be lonely. There's gonna be times that you're not sure you're gonna be able to make it. Like that you're just gonna get really frustrated with everything. Like that's okay. Like to feel that stuff and to kind of keep going anyway. But like don't think that that means there's something wrong. But that most importantly, like you actually can come back from this. So like there is stuff out there. There are people that you can find that you can work with, whether it's me, whether it's with other people. Of like if you do this the right way, like this doesn't have to be the end of anything. And so it's going to be hard. It's going to take a lot more work than you probably wanted to. It's going to be a lot more frustrating than you probably wanted to. But it's something that is absolutely possible. I've worked with some of the gnarliest cases out there that you can imagine of people that have had 9 knee surgeries and went into like 14 years of stuff that they've just like weren't sure they were ever going to do things again, and now they're back playing their sport, doing all the things that they want to do. Like it's this stuff's possible. And so like some of the standards that we've kind of talked about for everything out there have been maybe a little bit lower across the board than we would like it to, but that doesn't mean that there's nothing out there that you can do in order to come back. So it's going to take more work than you wanted to, but it's something that's possible.
Yeah. And you can come back a better player than you ever were in your life. And that's the hope there. And I encourage everyone, please do your research, find a good professional to work with in that return to sport phase. And Zach, where exactly are you in Colorado, just in case there's some listeners who are in the area?
Yep, I'm in Denver. We've got an amazing facility. I've been worked in Division 1 weight rooms. I've been to pro universities, and like we don't have, no one's has nicer facilities than we do here. So yeah, if you're in the, it's in the you're in the area, it's definitely worth stopping by. We've got a lot of online programs too for people that aren't nearby. So yeah, we can definitely help take care of you.
What's the facility called?
It's called Kula Sports Performance,
Oh,
Kula.
I've heard of it. Yes, for
Oh
sure.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I've worked with a few girls on the Real Colorado team
yeah.
remotely, and they love going there. I think they do a speed training with you guys. So
Yep.
yeah, that's awesome. What a small world.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. I've got one of the girls coming back from an ACL right now that we're working with. She's
Yeah.
doing awesome.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, guys, yeah, if you're in the Denver area, please reach out to Zach. I'll include his social media in the caption below. So be sure to follow him. Even if you're not in the area, just get educated on what rehab should be. It's really challenging. There's a lot of qualities you need to get covered. You can't just be doing 10-pound dumbbells the whole 12 months of your recovery. So follow Zach, learn some things, and I'll see you guys next time.